Hi, I'm licensed psychologist Dr. Clif P Lewis, and in a world of hyperconnectivity, you don't have to have an opinion on everything. But lucky for you, I do. Roll intro!
We don't want to get sued, so we're going to be like super vague. First mistake.
How are you a manager and unable to deal with conflict?
If nothing else, I'm balanced.
Welcome to Management Tool, the show about psychology, employment, and management, where my esteemed guest and I talk about why what you're doing is wrong. On the show with us today is my good friend, fellow industrial psychologist, Ise-Lu Möller. Why did I have difficulty saying your name? Ise-Lu Möller. Hello, Ise-Lu.
Hi, Clif.
Thanks for being on my show. Every time I say that, it feels so stupid because I know there's literally like only my friends and family watching. But welcome. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for forcing me to be here.
Girl, the shade of it all.
I have been forcing, this is the first season, so I've been forcing all of my guests to be on my show, my friends, family members, and colleagues. Ise-Lu is the only one who is being honest about it. But forced or not, I'm glad that you are here. Ise-Lu has spent a great deal of time working in social development, coaching, NGOs, NPOs. And we're going to be talking about coaching in resource-constrained organizations, right? Did I get that right? Yes. Okay, cool.
Yes.
So if anyone has been watching the show, the few previous episodes, they know that we start with, before we get into the roasting of what you're doing wrong, we start with the sharpest tool in the shed. And usually I do the sharpest tool in the shed, which is an example of someone doing something right. But today, given who the sharpest tool in the shed is, Ise-Lu is going to be sharing with us who that is. Take it away.
Thanks, Clif. Yeah, so we've been talking about, you just called it resource-constrained organizations, but we all know what that comes down to is companies or organizations who just don't have money to pay for coaching.
Right.
Coaching is really expensive and justifiably so. So something that I will forever be grateful for, and I think has made a massive difference in not only my life, but also my career, is my ex-employer that I worked for called Activate Leadership. And they are
Insert logo.
NGO and... Great.
I'm going to edit the logo.
NGO, NPO, all of those things, not-for-profit organization in South Africa. And naturally using money of a non-profit organization for anything outside of the mandated purpose or the mandated project of that organization, which is always mandated by the funder, it's quite difficult to loosen up funds and money to invest in the employees that work for those organizations. Now, we will probably get to all the reasons why that is not a good thing. But what Activate did, and I think what definitely makes them, for me, one of the sharpest tools in the shed when it comes to coaching, even if you don't necessarily have all the funds available, is what they did is, specifically for me, when I got promoted into a managerial role after I've been with them for a few years, we had a conversation and we felt that coaching is something that I could benefit from. But naturally, the issue of where would the money come from came up. And what my manager, as well as the management team at the time, did is they were allocated budget specifically for job-related or position-related training. So, for instance, we were in the industry of facilitation and education, and we did a lot of online trainings. So typically they could have sent me for something like facilitation training or virtual presentation creation or something that's very specifically related to my role. But what they then instead did is they motivated to use that little bit of funds that they had to send me on a job-specific training they used that and motivated to actually send me on a management coaching course of 10 sessions. They also negotiated.
Wow,
with
10
the
whole
coach
sessions.
to-
That's a lot.
Yeah, and they negotiated with the coach to charge us at non-profit rates, which is also something that organizations can remember, that often coaches do have a rate like that. And I think it was just such a brilliant brainwave, but implementation that they had or did at the time, because it definitely dramatically changed the way I managed my team at the time, but also how they ended up managing going forward, and all the things. Not only like I learned so much, but I think I left so much of what I learned there too. So yeah, I think definitely a sharp moment of them to do that.
So what I got from that is that they are the sharpest tool in the shed, because they thought a little bit. Why can't I speak today? As they thought a little bit outside of the box, in this sense, the box being only the organization's needs. They considered options for their constrained resources benefiting not only the organizational objectives, but also your personal growth. Because now, today, you are a ICF accredited, certified, whatever the terminology is, coach. Insert ICF information for whoever wants to know. Well, I mean, based on what we're discussing today, I think that's good. I'll put in links to, it's the International Coaching
Federation. Yeah, and so I'm working
I'll
towards
put in
my ACC accreditation, almost there. Don't ask
right,
me
but
what
you've
ACC
got
stands for, because I always have.
yeah, I'm sure they've got, like, you've done the certification, but then there's different levels of
Yes.
like when we registered, like you get psychometrist, then you get like psychologist. So both of us are the highest level of that specific.
Yes. So coaching as ACC, PCC. PCC is professional coach, and MCC is a master coach. I don't know why. I think is it associate? The A. I should know. I can go.
So I think that's maybe a good segue into the rest of our conversation, where we do the roasting. Is what is each of those? Okay, so each of those registration categories requires a certain level of education. So you did a very expensive accreditation course, I know, and then you have to work a certain amount of hours. So for each of those, there are certain requirements. But now, what is the implication of that in practice, other than the higher the registration category, the more expensive? How else does that translate into industry for the organization who has to pay for it?
So, yes, at ACC level, you have, if you are the client paying for an ACC coach to coach your employees or to coach you, what you can know is that person has 60 hours of coach-specific training. So that's quite intense. That's the course that you spoke about that I did. 60 hours, quite intensive, very practical coach training. And then after that, 100 hours of practical coaching. So one-on-one coaching with an individual, with a coachee or a client. So you are hiring someone, or you are paying someone who has 160 odd hours of intensive experience, but also more than 10 hours of one-on-one engaging mental coaching with a master coach that would give feedback and train that coach even more. So I'm also currently in that process. I have a mentor, and she's a MCC or a master coach. And she quite intensively trains and fine-tunes my my coaching style and my coaching approach, and how to kind of be better every time.
Okay, so you can only train other coaches if you have the highest level of certification.
I stand to be corrected, but I think it's only MCC that can be, or that I think you actually have to, I'm lying, Clifford. I think you have to be a mentor coach. I wanted to say now accredited, but I don't think that's an accreditation. But I think you have to be approved as a mentor coach, which is yet
maybe
another...
just maybe just also as background. not the great. Just for the sake of people who don't work in coaching or don't aren't familiar with the structure. So I mentioned that Ise-Lu and I are licensed IO psychologists. So different countries have different requirements and registration processes, but in general, any practice of psychology is regulated in most jurisdictions in most countries by a professional board, and in most jurisdictions it requires an accredited master's program and successfully completing a board exam. So that's not the case with coaching. Ise-Lu, you can correct me if I'm wrong. So with coaching, it's still a fairly new formalized practice. I mean, I've spoken to, because I've spoken to quite a few people who say they've been coaching before it's been coaching. So it's still a fairly new sort of formalized, professionalized practice. So it's not regulated, let's call it legally, as the practice of psychology. So when we say accredited, certified, that's pretty much just best practice, right? It's not. So anyone can technically call themselves a coach. It is up to the person, the client or the organization who's paying for it for their employees, to make sure that the person is actually a competent coach. Yeah. And I say that specifically because I also do coaching, but I have not been inside a coaching training session, nor do I hold any training certification, but I believe that my professional experience and in my licensure as industrial psychologist makes me acceptable or a responsible coach. Also, I want to share a funny story because shortly after Ise-Lu completed her very expensive course, I said, "Hey, I have a new coaching session tomorrow. Can you give me some tips?" And then she replied, "Oh, I can't believe that I have to now give you free advice for X amount of attending X amount course, and now you're going to get paid X amount." So full transparency, I do coaching as a psychologist, not doing therapy, but using that knowledge. And that's just the gist of how the industry is structured.
Yeah. And I think that's why, I mean, I'm working towards ICF accreditation. So, I mean, I believe in it and I think it's great. And I'm having a wonderful time on this journey and I'm learning a lot. But rightfully, as you say, Clifford, that isn't the be all and the end all. There's nothing wrong with organizations hiring coaches that are not ICF accredited. There's also, is it Comensa? I almost said Codesa, but that is not.
It is Comensa. I once looked for them and I looked for Mancosa, which is the MBA. Yes. And I was like, this website doesn't look right. But yes.
Yeah. So Comensa, but in any case, there's a whole lot of bodies that, and I think it's great. I think because coaching is such an incredibly valuable tool to deploy in your organization, it is great that there are bodies that are regulating the standards. Because I know you, Clifford, so I know that if I had to refer anybody to a coach, I would say 100% yes, Dr. Clifford Lewis.
You love me. You really love me.
But anyone can call themselves a coach. And unfortunately, that can also mean that organizations run into some duds and into some challenges and into some money wasting. So yes, if someone is ICF accredited, it is almost a quick way of knowing that you will be investing in hopefully quality.
Something that's credible.
Yeah.
But now see...
But also, and it's a global federation, right? So I think that's also something that organizations like. Is Comensa is only in South Africa, and Comensa doesn't necessarily have standards and accreditations, whereas the ICF is international. So if you're an international organization, it's almost the easiest way. Yeah.
But now, on that, I want to share another story, another personal anecdote, and that ties in with the main topic of coaching for organizations or settings where there is a constraint on resources. I think what you mentioned is the ICF regulating coaching practice is good because anyone can technically call themselves a coach, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're giving credible services. So yes, it is good for an organization to set standards of practice, but it's a double-edged sword because I work with one of my colleagues who I work with in the coaching space is a clinical psychologist, and he also does coaching, not as therapy, as coaching, but he also draws on his expertise as a clinical psychologist. And he says he doesn't want to register, and this is maybe a contentious statement, but he doesn't want to register with the ICF because he feels that these accreditation categories and sort of accreditation paths are along economic lines. So basically there's a paywall. If you don't have a certain amount of money, and you know this, your course that you did was expensive, getting the mentoring sessions are expensive. It's a very expensive journey, and then that translates into being an expensive service. So I don't know what my point is really that I want to make here. I just think it is a double-edged sword because yes, cool, it is regulated, but then that regulation translates into expensive training, and that translates into expensive service. Yeah. Whereas if we take something like our licensure as industrial psychologists, that's less, it's not cheap, but it's less expensive because it's a government body. It's not a private institution that regulates it.
Yeah, and I think, I don't want to say there's two options because there's obviously more than that always. But if you think about it's either a big organization or a big company or a big corporate that's either across South Africa or global, they would naturally say, we don't have time to spend on looking for coaches who are good, whether they're accredited or not. So we're rather just going to say, here's the money. For the accredited coaches, it comes at a premium, but we're willing to pay that because then we know what we're paying for. As opposed to in a smaller organization, if you're resource constrained, absolutely go look for the coaches that aren't necessarily accredited, that are maybe doing it as secondary to also being mentors or psychologists or therapists or whatever it is that they're doing, or industrial psychologists. A lot of industrial psychologists, interestingly enough, when I did my course, quite a few, I think there was about 5 out of the 21 classmates that were industrial psychologists. So always a good option for smaller organizations to look into that. I would, though, however, Clifford, that if you are a good coach, I wouldn't necessarily anticipate that whether you are accredited or not, if you are accredited, that you would cost that much more than someone that isn't accredited.
Oh, really?
Well, if you are a good coach, which I guess if you're not with the ICF,
careful.
Girl, the shade of it all.
I want to say, if you're not with the ICF, it's a bit hard to say, right? Because that's then a relative, are you good or are you not? That would be for your client or your coachee to say, or the employer of your client, whoever's paying you, to say whether you're a good coach or not. But I wouldn't assume that you would cost me cheaper. And I would actually not want to pay you less if you deliver as good a service.
Right.
Because coaching is, I always say that the coachee and the client is the one that 100% works the hardest, or at least in the sessions, they work the hardest. But the amount of work that it takes to get that person to do the work, is something that's definitely worth the cost for organizations that don't always think that way. But yeah, so I just wanted to say that it's either that, you either say, I'm throwing my money towards ICF accredited coaches, or I'm going to make an effort to look for coaches and potentially run into some, some trial and errors, some errors. But that's always an opportunity, avenue that smaller organizations or resource-constrained organizations can explore, or they naturally bodies like a Mensa to find coaches that are available and to then naturally explore what their costs are. Something that I've been thinking about, and I don't know if this is the right place, but let me say it in any case, since we're touching on costs. Coaches in training at the ICF, which is technically what I still am, even though I'm working towards my accreditation, because you have to do a certain amount of hours, so like 100 hours of one-on-one coaching, a certain percentage of those hours can be pro bono. And a lot of coaches are quite excited about that, because that means I can go sell myself to an organization and say, I've got 25 coaching hours for you for free. I don't have to charge you. You don't have to pay me. So that's also something that organizations can do, is they can contact the ICF and they can find out, or they can reach out to training organizations such as, for instance, Gibbs Business School, where I did my course. They can reach out and say, do you have contact details, or can you put me in contact with coaches who have pro bono hours available? So that's also really like a option that small organizations can explore. Yeah.
No, that's very good. That's a really great resource. And somewhere in the description, I will put a link where you can access that information. I wanted to just touch on what you mentioned about doing instead of just throwing money at ICF accreditation, doing a little bit of trial and error. Is there any tips that we can give resource-constrained organizations to reduce the amount of error? So what are the type of things? So you and I are, specialists in the people field, so we know what to look for. But what are maybe just a few things that someone can look for to make sure that even though I'm spending less money relatively, that I'm kind of sure that this is a credible person?
Yeah. So naturally, please set up what we usually call a three-way meeting to start with. So maybe I could say this, that naturally, like anything else in life, if you want to perhaps get away with slightly lower costs, it's going to cost you in other areas. So it's probably going to cost you a little bit more time or a little bit more energy. So hopefully, if you have the time, set up a three-way meeting. So that would be with, I really don't like the word coachee. A lot of coaches have this thing of, do you call it a client or do you call it a coachee? So just my personal preference. I try not to use the word coachee, although it's.
No, but tell me, I just that's just what people have been calling it. What do you call them, just out of interest?
I would rather call them a client.
Okay.
But I mean, that's also sometimes a bit confusing, because if an employer is paying a coach to coach the employee, then they are also your client.
The client,
So that's sometimes confusing for people. But in a
just also a quick side roast. I know a psychologist who refers to their clients. So just keep in mind, as anyone who's watching who doesn't know the the difference between psychologists, psychiatrists, any kind of psychologist, whether you're clinical or not, we are not medical professionals. Okay, even if you're licensed, they're psychologists. They call their clients patients.
They love that. I think there's a sense of feeling of importance that comes with it. I have my patients.
Anyway, yes, okay, so cool. So
for me, it feels a little bit like I don't know. I don't know why it feels patronizing to me, but in any case, that's really just a personal preference. Anyway, so have a three-way meeting with the coachee client / patient. I'm joking. The coachee or the client. And then the employer, so whether that be the direct line manager or perhaps the senior manager who's in charge of development or coaching or training, and then naturally the coach. That we usually call a bit of a chemistry session, although the coachee and the coach will also later have their own chemistry session. But have have a meeting and discuss the coach's approach. And perhaps what would be easier is if to tell you what red flags to look out for.
Okay.
As opposed to how you would know immediately whether this is a good coach, how you would know that this would potentially not be the best coach, is if the approach sounds anything like therapy or mentoring. So that is not what coaching is. I mean, all these, what would you call it, fields, right? The field of psychology.
I am listening. I'm thinking of a sound effect that I can. I'm listening. I'm thinking of a sound effect. But carry on, yes.
I thought you maybe ordering Uber Eats since it's lunch.
I'm in the bush. We don't get delivery here.
So all these fields, right? Psychology and mentoring and coaching, what else is there? Therapy, whatever. All of these fields will be quick to say, and rightfully so. Therapy is not whatever else it is, it's not coaching, it's not mentoring. Mentoring is not coaching and it's not therapy. And coaching is not therapy and it's not psychology. But that is really important. So what is really hard as a coach, if I can speak from the coach's perspective, and that's also something that you really learn in training, and I'm sure, Cliff, that you've come across this too, is it is hard to not go into advice giving.
Oh, yeah.
In an advice giving state, right? Because
especially as a consulting psychologist who, in an organizational perspective, often have to give advice. Exactly. But when you're in a one-on-one relationship, that's much different. Or
if you perhaps a counselor, a career counselor in an organization, or the person that people go to for this kind of advice. As a coach, it is really hard, right? Especially if you're into people, it's hard for us to not do it. And so that's probably also why that we pay so much to get trained, is to train that out of you, right?
You shut your mouth.
Shut your mouth, because what I'm getting to is that it is detrimental for your coachee or your client. So as an employer, if you are in that meeting and you listen to the coach's approach, if there's anything about counseling or mentoring or advice giving, I would be cautious, or I would perhaps investigate a little bit more, because you do not want to pay for your employee, or even if you are paying for yourself for life coaching, you do not want to pay for sessions where advises, this is what you should do next, I think you should do that next, or let me validate what you're doing is right, or actually I don't think you should be doing that, because that is not what coaching is. I personally have in meetings like that said, I'm sorry, but I'm not willing to take on this coaching because what you are looking for is mentoring. And so
maybe just to conceptualize that is, when you're in a training position, or you're a trainer or a mentor or a therapist, you are in a level of, you're in a position of power because you have additional expertise or qualification, and you're, as you said, giving support, giving advice, when you're a coach, you're equals.
Yeah.
You're I think it was you that I heard say that for the first time, you're a thinking partner. Yeah. So the coaching relationship is very different in the sense that you are fully equal.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Clifford, for bringing that up. I was going to say that as well. It's a total equal, and that's total equal thinking partner relationship. And that's the position that the coach takes on. And that's also often why, side note for coaches, it's such a mutually beneficial relationship, because you often walk away having learned so much yourself if you get that very equal footing right. So yes, to not waste money in looking for 100,000 coaches and getting excited about someone that's telling you that they're going to teach your employee how to have better communication skills or how to manage their team better, that's not what you want.
So red flags are advice, teaching, mentoring. I just want to see if this is the correct sound effect I was looking for.
Red flag. Red flag. Red flag. Red flag.
So that's a tip. And then the other thing I would say is someone suggesting a very long-term relationship. Coaching shouldn't be more than 6 to 10 sessions. So if it's someone that suggests, they work
Ongoing.
over the next year or as an ongoing relationship, no. Naturally, yes, people will return to coaches, but as a kind of periodic engagement, I wouldn't go for more than 10 sessions.
I think that's a very, very good one. And I think a very important one is if at any point you're getting the impression that the coach or the person selling the coaching service is trying to upsell you, big red flag.
I enjoy the check.
Because that essentially fosters a codependent relationship where the coachee or the client feels, if this is ongoing, so you don't want a situation where your coachee or your client feels like, okay, I can't take any action or make a decision unless I speak to my coach first. That is the situation that we're working towards eliminating.
Yeah. And I think, yes, absolutely. I mean, this just brings me to, it's just, I understand that a lot of organizations don't see the value if you haven't been engaging in coaching or if you haven't invested in it for your employees. But I mean, maybe it's because I'm in the business of people. A lot of it's often seen as fluffy, and maybe what I will say now is also sounding, unicorns and fluffy rainbows. But you dealing with people and their lives and their careers, and a person who you want to work for your organization and be committed to your organization and be fully present and give as much as they can for your organization. So any coach who makes you feel that they're there because they also want you to buy their book, or they also, want to get more Instagram likes, or, wants to sell it, I would be wary.
I enjoy the check.
I get it. I mean, I'm trying to have my own coaching consultancy on the side. Yes, we need the money, and yes, we need the sessions, and yes, we need the clients. But I also know that as a coach, if you take on the wrong client or you take it on for the wrong reason, it is messy and it is embarrassing and it is awkward. And halfway through, you're trying to find a way to get out of this relationship, because in these sessions, when you are one-on-one with this person as a human being, you cannot fake it. So if they try fake it in the boardroom, convincing the employer to pay them to be the coach, it won't probably last very long. And if I say faking it, I mean, if there's these grotesque promises of how, amazing they can be and how many hours they can give you. And, I would really look for authenticity, because that's really what's going to be sustainable in the sessions with the client or the coachee, but also beyond that. And that's ideally what you want. You really want to invest in a coach that can impart.
Okay. So how do I know? Because I often, for non-people, so people that don't work in HR or OD or training or psychology or anything like that, I often find it hard to explain what coaching is. When I started getting into coaching and I would mention it to a family member, they'd be like, okay, but we know what you're doing as a psychologist, but we don't know what coaching is. And I actually really struggle, because I'm so used to either the client knows what they're looking for, or I'm speaking to a colleague like you, who, if I say coach, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So for an organization who's maybe new and to coaching and they want to explore getting coaching for their employees, how do you know coaching is something you might want to explore?
As an organization, or
as an organization or as an individual, yeah. How do what's the indicators that coaching is something that you might want? So I suppose in this instance we should probably define coaching, which I don't really want to do. You can.
I mean, ICF has got a little grand definition of it.
Yeah, so you can look it up what the definition is of coaching. But how do I know?
The words that often would come up Ooh, sorry, it's me and hitting my table again.
That's fine.
The Interestingly, the words that often come up in chemistry sessions or in introduction sessions between coach and coachee or coach and client are often things like, I want to do this, but I don't know how to. I feel stuck. I don't have clarity. So those are often words that coachees bring to first sessions, or their managers would bring it to say, we want person X to be a little bit better. They probably won't say it like that. They'll call it a developmental area.
They're supposed to call it a developmental area. Or people like us bash them over the head and say, no, don't call it that. Call it the developmental area.
With the fluff rollers. What do you call those things?
Well, I call this not taking my dog to the SPCA.
Saving my dog's life.
This is Buddy's savior. This is Buddy's thing that he worships on a Sunday.
Anyway,
he owes his life to this. Yes.
Yeah,
So clarity stuck.
Clarity stuck. Wanting to develop a specific skill. Often, yeah, sure, you can send someone on training to be better at.
Because that's what I wanted to ask now. So how is that different? How do I know my need for? And I know this is a very difficult question, and it's more of a discussion rather than I'm putting you in a corner. Like, answer this question now.
Yeah.
So, again, if I've got emotional problems, I kind of know I need to see a psychologist. I might not know if it's a counseling or a clinical psychologist, but if it's like an emotional distress, something okay. If I want to learn a skill, I know, okay, I need to go to training. If I want to be an expert in an area that I can't get training, I might need a mentor who's got many years of experience. How do I know that it's coaching that's likely? And there's no black or white answer, but how is that different from all the other ones?
I think what I can maybe share is, because I've been on the receiving end of coaching, and because I've also seen in my being the coach in my sessions with coachees, how they have that similar experience. Post-coaching or during a coaching journey, it is really as if things in your brain gets unstuck. Like for me, it literally feels like nuts and bolts that like get unstuck and things open up that I never thought about, or just a different way in thinking about things. And it's always come in this thinking partner process with my coach, right? And it's always been my own work. I mean, yeah, sure, the coach also works. That's why we pay them. And if they weren't there, then I wouldn't have been able to find that thinking pattern. But, or at least they assist me in finding that thinking pattern. But it's always been my own inner work, my own undoing of how I thought about things, questioning. I mean, lots of people might not know this, but coaching equals a lot of questioning. And sometimes it's so frustrating as the coachee, because what you want is the answer and advice. You don't want the coach to ask you another, so what do you think? But it's in those what do you think moments that the unstuckness happened for me. But I can also see it in my clients or in my coachees' minds or in their journeys, how they get unstuck. So I'm saying that to answer you, to say that how do we know that coaching is the thing that we need to embark on, is I would say that if there's potential, so either the coachee themselves or the employer knows that there's potential. I mean, this is also an interesting thing to consider, is that there's many employees or people who aren't ready for coaching, right? So how do you know also someone is ready for coaching is when you know that there's potential, and that often when the employee themselves are saying, I know that that's where I want to get to. I want to get to that level of management of my team, or I want to be able to impact my team in this specific way, but somehow I'm not getting it right. So both the coachee or the potential coachee as well as the employer know or can see that there's potential. Potential is also quite a cliche, I think, especially in our side of the world. You know, everybody's got untapped potential.
One of the many.
Tap into people's potential. But there is a little bit to be said about that, you know, that untapped resources that's already within someone. So I think if there's visible potential, if there's a feeling of I want to, but I don't know how to get there, that's a bit of stuckness. And my personal opinion is that any person who manages one or more people is a very good candidate for coaching.
Okay.
There's always, because that's also what happens in coaching, right, is we use very real-time examples. So what happened this week, I was frustrated because Clifford didn't do ABC in my team. Okay, how did you handle that? How would you better want to handle that? What would you like to do about it, coachee? So there's always...
Why is it a problem? Why is it a problem now?
Exactly. And someone who manages people there's a lot of development potential there, because it gives that person or that manager a lot of space to think about how they do things, how they impact others. And that's what you want as an organization. And that is why I will always, even if it's my last bit of money, if I have a company, I would not hesitate to spend it on coaching. Mentoring is something that you can arrange within an organization. Often mentorship is free. Therapy is not necessarily your mandate as an organization. Sure, it is amazing from a well-being perspective if organizations have these employee well-being service providers that they subsidize, which is also something that I stand for. But I don't think in 2021 there is one single person on the face of this planet that cannot benefit from therapy. Absolutely.
Damn.
No, absolutely. I mean, that's what I always say. I'm like my therapist and my coach.
Yes.
The three of us will conquer this life. But in any case, why I would strongly suggest investing, because you are not only investing in that coachee or in that manager, but you are also investing in how they impact the employees that they work with or the employees that they manage. I mean, I feel really lucky on behalf of the people who I ended up managing.
Lucky. She's a star.
Who's that again? Isn't it Britney?
It's Britney, bitch.
Of course, she deserves a second or two in every podcast.
I know, right?
It would have been detrimental to the people who I ended up managing that year when I got promoted if I didn't go on a coaching course. And I am convinced that they themselves ended up being better employees because of the way.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think any personal development, if it's high quality, incredible personal development, is a bad or a useless thing. I think with coaching, the big thing is making sure that the person is ready for it, and we're getting it from someone who knows what they're doing, and not like you said earlier, trying to upsell or get like a long-term codependent thing going.
And that ready for it thing is really important. And often, maybe that's also why managers are make good coachees, because they are often ready for it. And I have a deal with my coachees that if by session 2 or 3 we realize that what we're doing is not coaching, or it's not working for us, or we don't feel ready, then we don't continue, because it's flipping torture.
Yes, and and so that's one of the difficult things with coaching, is it requires authenticity. You touched on authenticity earlier, but it requires authenticities on both parts. We're in that relationship. We have to be open to having difficult conversations, and one of those conversations is, listen, I don't think this is working out. And you have to be willing to have that conversation, both as a coach and a coachee / client / patient. Oh my God, that's merch. That's a merch idea.
What?
Coachee / client / patient. It's only going to be funny for like
that one, that inclusivity or whatever activist shirt that says, it has like a whole list of things like white, and then it's strike through, black strike through, lesbian strike through, Asian, strike through, whatever.
Oh,
all these
human?
different- And then human, and then at the bottom it says human. So you should
Yeah, I
have
haven't seen one of those in a
coachee,
while.
client, patient, human.
I'm jacking that. It's going into my merch store right now, the one that I don't have yet.
I was
Trust
thinking
there will
of
be one
something
soon.
now that I wanted to say. Oh,
And then I interrupted you.
you didn't even ask me this question, but let me just say it anyway. Something that I thought was important is that thinking back, I didn't know what coaching was before I embarked on it, right? I'm very happy that I stumbled upon it. I think I thought of it as a bit more mentoring because I was like, I don't know how to be a manager, send someone to help me. And it ended up not being that. It ended up them saying to me, okay, well, figure out how to be a better manager in my coaching journey. But I think what's important to know for someone who needs to think whether they want to spend some of their restrained resources on coaching is to know that coaching has a very specific focus. You'll know this, Clifford. So in a 10 or 6 or 10 session coaching journey, there's a vision. So there's somewhere where we need to get to. And it's not as broad as I want to be a better manager. The coachee is almost forced to narrow that thing down, and often the manager gets to give some input, obviously, because the client is paying for it. So the manager will say, actually, we think that this person should be a little bit better in managing their team in a more flexible way or in a more assertive way or in a whatever. So there's a longer term vision, but each and every session also has a very specific focus. So you need to know that as the investor, as the employer, who's going to pay for that coaching, it's quite great that you could pinpoint certain things for that coach and for the coachee that you specifically want them to work on in order for that employee to not only be a better employee in your business, but also a better human for themselves. But yes, I think that was just important because I think coaching is often placed in the fluffy category and that we don't have money for that now. But it's often a great solution to actually unearthing skills that your employees didn't know they had themselves, such as communication skills, such as team management skills, such as assertiveness, flexibility, time management, which is a big
Right.
thing
So then I think what I want to do is I want to conclude the session because I'm just looking at the time and I just realized I didn't read your bio in the beginning because I said in the beginning, I want this to be organic and just flow. And so it flowed so much that I completely forgot to properly introduce you. I did at least, I think, mention your name. So at least
you
people
also
know who I'm
said
talking.
what I did and where I worked.
Oh, right. Okay.
That was flattering enough, but I mean,
I don't want anyone to think that Ise-Lu doesn't have a crazy resume. She does. I mean, she knows me, so obviously she does. Anyway, so what I want to conclude on is with spaces where there is a resource constraint and there needs to be training, there needs to be mentoring, there needs to be all kinds of other stuff, bonuses that need to be paid, wada. How do we make an argument for the prioritization of coaching? Because we can't have everything. So if we now must choose coaching, why must we choose coaching? If there's so many other things we can spend money on. You see it here, folks. Cliff asking the difficult question.
No, I think I know the answer. Well, at least this is my opinion. But if I had to, I would say that if coaching done right is a highly transformational tool. And if I was a business owner or a decision maker in a resource constrained organization, and I followed the principle of human resources, where if I invest in my people and my people are well, then my business will be well. Then I want to have people who are sustainably transformed and who didn't just go on a training course. I mean, I'm a trainer and a facilitator myself, so I'm not saying training and facilitation doesn't have its place. but who went on a 3-day workshop to learn better verbal skills and comes back with a certificate. If I had to weigh that up against a coaching journey where I intensely worked with someone who honed my skills and who was a partner with me in thinking how I can do this better and debriefing it with me every time and seeing how we can deploy it better next time, I would choose coaching. I would choose a transformed individual in my organization that can sustainably continue to deploy those skills that they've learned. And it would probably cost me a little bit more than a training workshop. But yeah, that's why I would choose it.
Because what I'm thinking now as well, working in training for a long time myself, is training is great, and there will be some variations, but for the most part, when someone attends training, they still are required to apply that skill or knowledge in the workplace. If someone attends therapy and you typically learn better coping mechanisms and habits, you still have to go back and then apply that knowledge or skill in your everyday life on a continuous basis. As you said, coaching is transformational. So it's almost like a Pokemon that goes into that evolves into a different form. When you've done coaching, you evolve into your new form and you're transformed. It's a mindset change. It's a complete transformation. I think that's a very good description that makes it so much different from the other ones.
Yeah, and one last quick thing. I know we cognizant of time, but and so if we lean on the roasting side, what organizations would do is immediate satisfaction.
Girl, the shade of it all.
So you need to turn around more numbers tomorrow, or you need to whatever, get your team to be more productive tomorrow, or your KPIs need to show better results at the end of this month. And I can understand that if organizations are under pressure and we need to make money and we need to pay salaries, then naturally that is the kind of pressure that you're going to put on your teams or on your employees. But if you look at all these, there's always these many lists of, the skills that would matter in the workplace in the next 10 years. Very few, we can probably pull up one of those lists, but very few of those skills is something that you would go to a training workshop for and come back and know how to problem solve.
Yeah.
Or know how to critically think, or know how to, communicate with assertiveness and flexibility or whatever. Very few of those skills are something that you can get a certificate for. And I think that is something that coaching can definitely hone. Because that's, if you ultimately want a business where your people are well and where your business will be doing well, I would rather opt for having people who are able to, like you say, who are able to know what to do with these skills that they have, these more, what do you call those skills? Is it more technical skills?
Yeah.
But where do they get the soft skills to deploy those skills into the workplace? Yeah.
Awesome. Ise-Lu told me before the session she doesn't have social media, so I'm not going to ask you where my two listeners can cyberstalk you. I will just say that I am. Don't you? Never mind. I am available to the dismay of the younger generation on all the platforms, including TikTok. Oh! I think I just remembered what the red flag thing is. It's MC Hammers can touch this.
Red flag.
Cliff,
Yes.
I am on, it's not a social media platform, but I think I am still on the LBBC consultancy page.
Oh, yes. So Ise-Lu and I still do some work together, even though we don't work together permanently. And you're able to find her full bio, which I didn't read in the beginning, and contact details on www.lbbc.co.za, and you just go to our team, and then Ise-Lu's deets are there. I'm on all social media at Clif with one F P Lewis. You don't know how many times I say Clif with one P. It's Clif with one F P Lewis on all social media. You can also look at my link tree, which is linktree/Clif P Lewis. And thank you again, Ise-Lu, for discussing discussing coaching in resource-constrained context. I think you have very valuable insights, and thanks for sharing that.
Thanks, Clifford. I enjoyed it. I think it's evident if I get so caught up that time passes so quickly.
I can't believe, because I said in the beginning, we have to look at time because the podcast is supposed to be 20 to 30 minutes, and before I know it, we're at 45 already. So
Wonderful.
so thanks for
Always
everything.
Enjoy chatting to you. Thank you.
Yes, likewise. And thanks for watching. Subscribe to all the things, and see you next time. Bye.